Auburn Dodge, does this sound fixed to you?
The new Ram over there, and it's puking coolant everywhere, so that one will be next.
I have a 2025 Ram 1500, the Rebel. It's just not working.
They killed the engine you loved, they jacked up the price of the truck you trusted, and they tried to sell you an electric muscle car you never asked for. Now the bill has finally come due. Stellantis, the company behind Jeep, Ram, Dodge, and Chrysler, just posted the first loss in its history, $26 billion, and the CEO grabbed his $40 million payout and ran. The loyal buyers saw this coming a mile away. But how did it come to this? How did the company that owns America's most iconic trucks go from $20 billion in record profit to the biggest collapse in Detroit in 2 years? Make sure you subscribe, because I started this channel for one reason, to share what dealerships and car makers don't want you to hear. With your support, I can keep making these videos. Now let's get into it. The answer starts with just how deep this hole really goes, because that $26 billion headline is only the top layer of the wreckage. The official figure is a loss of 22.3 billion euros, which works out to roughly $26 billion, and it is the first annual loss this company has ever posted in its history. Peel it back, and it somehow gets even worse. This company did not stumble into one bad year by accident. In the United States, its sales just fell for the 7th year in a row, 7 straight years of decline. This is not a rough patch. This is a slow-motion crash that has been building for the better part of a decade. Things got so bad that the company was forced to pull its own financial forecast for the year after sales across North America dropped by around 20%. The stock lost roughly 40% of its value in a single year, while rivals like General Motors were actually climbing. Investors were sprinting for the exits. When a company this size bleeds off 40% of its value while its rivals are climbing, that is not the market being unfair. That is the market telling you something is deeply structurally broken. And look at how fast the floor fell out in North America, which used to be the money printing region. The profit margin there went from a fat 15.4% back in 2023 down to 4.2% the next year, and then straight into the red at negative 3.1%. In other words, in the region where this company made almost all its money, it went from minting cash to setting it on fire in about 2 years flat. And here is the part that should make every American truck buyer sit up. The two brands doing the most damage to this company are the two that Americans love the most, Ram and Jeep. This company did not get killed by some foreign competitor or some freak recession. It shot itself, right in the heart of its own lineup. So let's talk about how the people running this place managed to break the brands that were supposed to save it. To understand how it got this bad, you have to look at the man who was steering the ship, Carlos Tavares. For years, Tavares was celebrated across the industry as a cost-cutting genius, the guy who could squeeze a profit out of a stone. And squeeze he did. He cut costs everywhere he could find them. He pushed prices higher and higher, and for a while the profits looked absolutely incredible on paper. But here's what that kind of relentless squeezing actually does over time. It quietly hollows the whole company out. Quality started slipping. Dealers started complaining loudly that the vehicles were wildly overpriced and the lots were drowning in unsold metal. Loyal buyers, the people who had driven these brands their whole lives, started quietly walking away. It got so bad that the company's own dealers openly turned on him. In the fall of 2024, the group that represents Stellantis dealers across America sent an open letter that tore into Tavares by name, accusing him of, and I am quoting them here, reckless short-term decision-making to secure record profits, and blaming him directly for the rapid degradation of Jeep, Dodge, Ram, and Chrysler. Now think about how bad things have to get for a company's own dealers, the people who make their living selling these vehicles, to publicly call out their own CEO in writing. And here's the detail that really lands. In that record year of 2023, the year he squeezed everything dry, Tavares was paid around $40 million, the highest of any car company boss on earth outside of Tesla. He got $40 million for lighting the fuse. And then, as Jeep and Ram sales fell straight off a cliff, Carlos Tavares did not stay to clean up the mess he had made. He abruptly resigned and walked right out the door. The so-called genius was gone the very second the bill came due. In his place, the company scrambled to bring in a new CEO, Antonio Filosa, who is now essentially running an emergency room, slashing prices and begging back the exact customers the last guy chased away. Think about that for a second. The man who broke it got to leave with his reputation and his money, and everyone else, the workers on the line and the families in the driveways, got stuck holding the shattered pieces. That is almost always how these stories go at the top. But the real damage becomes crystal clear the moment you look at what they did to Ram. Ram should have been untouchable. It is a full-size truck brand with a die-hard blue-collar following in a country that quite literally runs on pickup trucks. So how in the world do you break something that strong? Simple. You reach in and take away the one thing your customers love the most. For years, the beating heart of the Ram 1500 was the Hemi V8, a big, loud, torquey engine that truck guys genuinely loved and bragged about. It was not just an option, it was part of the truck's whole identity. And Stellantis, in its infinite wisdom, decided to kill it off, replacing it with a new twin-turbo six-cylinder engine that almost nobody had asked for. The backlash was instant and it was brutal. Truck buyers do not take kindly to being told what they are supposed to like, so they walked. Ram lots started stacking up with unsold trucks, sitting at around 112 days of supply, roughly 20 days worse than the rivals over at Chevy and Ford. To try to move all that unsold metal, dealers started stacking thousands of dollars in cash right on the hood, advertising brand new Rams for $1,000 under invoice, and then piling factory money on top, and even that was not enough to clear the lots. A framer near Fort Worth, Texas, who had bought nothing but Rams his entire adult life, told the Ram dealer outside San Antonio flat out that he was not buying a truck without a V8 under the hood, and believe me, he was not the only one saying it. It got so bad that Ram's own boss, Tim Kuniskis, publicly came out and admitted that killing the Hemi was a mistake, and the company is now scrambling to shove the V8 back into the lineup. Let me put that as plainly as I can. They ripped out the thing people loved, watched their own sales collapse, and then came crawling back to beg for forgiveness. That is not a strategy. That is an apology tour with a marketing budget. And while the executives play these expensive games, real people are the ones who paid the price. And I mean real people, with real families. When Ram sales collapsed and the company finally ended production of the older Ram 1500 Classic, it gutted the workforce at the Warren Truck Plant in Michigan, with as many as 2,450 workers facing indefinite layoff as the plant dropped from 2 shifts down to 1. Sit with that number for a second. Nearly 2,500 families at one plant in one single announcement. Over at the Belvidere plant in Illinois, Stellantis shut the whole operation down indefinitely, leaving around 1,350 workers hanging in limbo, handed a vague promise that maybe, someday out in 2027, the plant might reopen to build some future truck that does not even exist yet. And then, as if to twist the knife, the company told its United States auto workers there would be no profit-sharing checks for the year, because there simply were no profits left to share. These are people who gave years, sometimes decades of their lives to build Jeeps and Rams. They bought houses near these plants. They raised their kids on the simple promise that the line would always be running. And what they got in return was a layoff notice and an empty envelope, while the executives who actually made the disastrous calls walked away perfectly fine. That is the human cost buried underneath a $26 billion loss. It is never, ever the people at the top who pay for it. The man who made these calls collected $40 million. The man who bolted the trucks together collected a layoff notice. That is the whole story of this company in 2 sentences. But believe it or not, the brand damage was still not finished, because Dodge was quietly falling apart at the exact same time. Dodge is the perfect example of this entire disease boiled down into one single brand. Dodge sales dropped 28% across 2025, and earlier in that year they were down a genuinely staggering 49%, very nearly cut in half, and the reason behind it is almost too on the nose to believe. And it was not just the Charger. Dodge also rolled out a little compact crossover, the Hornet, to chase a crowd that was never its crowd, and it landed with a thud, sitting on lots while the brand's actual fans wanted nothing to do with it. But the Charger is where the real damage was done. Dodge took its legendary Charger, a muscle car built its whole life around a roaring V8, and turned it into an electric vehicle that its core buyers never asked for and never wanted. The electric Charger sold a little over 7,000 units, and then the very moment the federal EV tax credit went away, the sales fell straight off a cliff, dropping to just 346 in a single quarter. By the following year, it had collapsed almost 90%. Now here's the part that tells you everything. Meanwhile, the gas-powered Charger that Dodge finally, reluctantly brought back, its sales shot up more than 400%. Read that one more time. The electric one they'd bet the entire brand on cratered, and the gas one the customers were begging for exploded. The market could not possibly have sent a clearer message if it had hired a skywriter. People wanted the rumble, the horsepower, the noise, and Stellantis looked them dead in the eye and handed them a battery and a government mandate instead. Now Dodge is desperately scrambling to bring back the V8, the supercharged Hellcat, all of it chasing the very customers it spent years lecturing and ignoring. But the single biggest, most expensive mistake of all is what they managed to do to Jeep. Jeep, for decades, was basically a license to print money. It was the crown jewel of the whole empire, the brand people would happily pay almost anything to own. Not anymore. Jeep has now posted 5 straight years of falling sales. 5 years in a row. And the reason is about as simple as it gets. Pure, short-sighted greed. Under the old leadership, Jeep jacked its prices up so high, so fast, that regular working families simply got priced clean out of the brand they had grown up loving. The Grand Wagoneer, Jeep's big flagship luxury SUV, climbed to sticker prices that made ordinary people laugh out loud and walk away. And when nobody would buy them at those insane numbers, the trucks just sat there and rotted on the lots. And a Jeep is not supposed to just sit. This is the brand that once had people lining up and happily paying over sticker to own one. Watching brand new Grand Wagoneers pile up unsold, month after month, is like watching the most popular kid in school suddenly end up eating lunch all alone in the corner. So now the pure desperation is set in. Jeep started slashing prices on the Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer by as much as $7,000. On the electric Wagoneer S, dealers were piling on discounts that approached $25,000 off the sticker, and by the end of the year they were throwing more than $16,000 in straight cash on the hood just to move them off the lot. A family out in suburban Denver that had proudly owned 3 different Jeeps over the years walked into a Jeep dealer in the area, took one long look at the price tag hanging on a new Grand Wagoneer, and quietly walked right back out the door. The new CEO is now out there publicly promising to bring prices down across the entire lineup, which, when you really think about it, is just a fancy way of admitting they had been gouging their most loyal customers for years. And that gouging, more than anything else, is exactly what shoved this whole empire right up to the edge of the cliff. So here is the real reason Stellantis is collapsing, and it ties every single piece of this story together into one ugly knot. This company got greedy, and it got arrogant. It looked out at the most loyal customers in the entire industry, the truck guys, the muscle car guys, the Jeep families who had been buying these vehicles for generations, and it decided that it knew better than all of them. It killed the engines they loved in order to chase government mandates. It jacked prices through the roof to pad a few years of short-term profit. It shipped overpriced trucks and let the quality quietly slip while the lots overflowed with metal nobody wanted. And when the customers finally collectively said enough is enough and walked away, the entire house of cards came crashing straight down. $26 billion in losses. A CEO who fled the scene. Thousands of workers thrown out onto the street. Entire factories going dark. Brands that were once woven into the fabric of American life, now sitting on dealer lots that nobody is even bothering to shop. This was not bad luck, and it sure was not the economy. This was a company that forgot the single most important rule in this entire business. You do not get to tell the customer what he wants. He tells you. And the moment you stop listening to him, he stops buying from you, and no amount of cost-cutting genius on earth can save you from that. Every single dollar of that $26 billion hole traces straight back to that one arrogant idea, that a boardroom full of executives knew better than the millions of people actually writing the checks. They did not. They never do. And the truck guy in the driveway, the one they treated like he was too dumb to know what he wanted, turned out to be the only one in this whole story who was right the entire time. Stellantis just learned that lesson the most expensive way that anyone, anywhere, ever has. And now we get to the part where we find out who actually pays for all of it. It is not Carlos Tavares, who walked away clean from the wreck that he personally built. It is the framer near Fort Worth, who simply wanted a truck with a V8 in it. It is the 2,400 workers at Warren Truck staring down a layoff notice they did not see coming. It is the Jeep family out in Denver priced right out of the brand their own parents used to drive. And it is every single loyal Ram and Jeep owner watching the resale value of their trucks quietly sink as the company that built them fights just to stay alive. And if you want to see just how far this fall goes, look at Chrysler. This is one of the founding names of the entire American auto industry, a company that once defined Detroit, and it is now down to basically one single model in its whole lineup. One. A brand that helped build this country's car industry has been hollowed out to almost nothing, and hardly anyone even noticed it happen. Dodge and Ram are frantically scrambling to undo years of terrible decisions. The new boss is out there promising a big turnaround, but here is the hard truth. You cannot unlay off a family. And you cannot instantly win back a customer you spent a solid decade insulting. The brands themselves will probably survive in some shape because they are simply too iconic to vanish overnight. But the trust? That is going to take a whole lot longer to rebuild than any balance sheet ever will. And the people paying for it are the exact ones who love these trucks the most. The new CEO is set to lay out his full turnaround plan for Jeep and Ram over the coming year. And whatever he promises up on that stage, the sales numbers are going to tell the real story. Subscribe so you get that breakdown straight from me, before the company gets a chance to spin it.